You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
All right, Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. It is all about me today, Charles.
Is it? Take over, Jamie.
The camera's on me. Hang on.
Is it?
Hey, there we go. Hi, I'm Jamie Flanagan, and this guy next to me wrote a trilogy of books called Detroit City of Champions. It's all about the 1935 year in this fabulous city we like to call Detroit. And it's just the stories, Charles, that you were able to capture and pull together from all these original sources. Just the tales of the traveling storyteller, and it's just I love all the stuff that you pull together in these books. And we brought in a guest, one of the people that's has a bunch of knowledge about a lot of Detroit sports, and sharing his stories with us.
Tom's our buddy, Tom Eurich.
Tom Eurich, thanks for being with us again.
Man, yeah.
Well, it's welcome to be back. It's very exciting.
Yeah, well, Tom. Tom was the guy that he was at the Golden Huddle for the 50th anniversary party for the Lion, for the Lions to celebrate the 50th anniversary of their first championship. And so, Tom actually had a chance to talk with a lot of these guys, which is it's just so cool because the stories that we're trying to extract these stories from Tom's brain. That's what we're here. Like this is like a science experiment. We're sitting there trying to probe. We're asking Tom questions and poking him a little bit, and the stories keep popping out one after the other. Yeah.
Well, that was 35 years ago, and I'm trying to do the best I can.
You're doing a fine job, Tom. You're doing a fine job. We're glad to have you back for another show, man.
It's not like pulling teeth at all. These stories come very fast and easy with Tom.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, if you ask me a question, I'll try to do the best on the answer because most of them I've known.
Yeah.
I've talked to them one way or the other.
That's what I mean. You're actually in this room with the teams. And one of the things you were saying, I just want to kind of emphasize that is that, we talked about how, this is a story of this team that began in Portsmouth and came over to Detroit. This is the first Detroit Lions team. And for Detroiters, that for Detroiters, they're all wrapped up in the Detroit Tigers. And so there's this new team that comes in, and so for us, the Lions are something that's been with us since all of us have been alive.
Correct.
But for these people, this is just some new team, whatever. Like some people might have cared. Oh, I like football. I'll go check them out. But for a lot of people, they were just second class back news stories, and that's why I think is one of the interesting components of this whole story is not only did they come from Portsmouth. They weren't just some random new expansion team. This was a team with already a deep history of competition against against the best teams in the league. The Packers, the Bears, the Giants. I mean, all of them had history against some of the best teams. And, they were always just finishing second place every year. And so when they came to Detroit, they already had an organization. They already had a rivalry organization built. And they brought those rivalries with them to Detroit, and I think that's one of the most interesting components is that all of a sudden the Packers and Bears, these are teams that the Detroit faithful surely would have known about, of course, because just seeing them in the sports section, but all of a sudden to see just the blood feud that their new team out of nowhere they have this blood feud with these existing NFL powers. It was something that had to be compelling to that team.
Well,
to the fans.
When Portsmouth became a NFL city, they had to have sponsorship, and Green Bay Packers sponsored them. And a lot of people don't know that. That's the rivalry between the Packers and the Lions. And at one time, at one stage, the Packers didn't want to play the Lions. And
we talked about that in the show.
And one of the Lions said, or the Spartans at the time, said, well, they're just a bunch of cheeseheads.
Oh, that's
right. And if you go to Green Bay, they put the actual head.
They celebrate it now.
That's where it all started.
Yeah.
And that's Detroit's big rivalry, is the Packers and the Lions.
Sure.
To this day, Thanksgiving, most
and
of the
the
time.
Bears, sure.
And the Bears, those two, The two great traditions.
So, Tom, you have something of a storied radio career. We were talking about the place I get to work, the Fisher Building, with at 96.3, and then our sister station, WJR. But you had a long radio career. Where were you at, and what were you doing again?
Well, I started out at WCAR, which was a little station. And before that, I got into radio, and I was doing helping a lady on the Talk of the Town, Florence Laramie, do her radio show, and I would do the sports capsule. And then I was at this little shop, and that's how she came in. And then I got into radio, and evidently Mr. Bailey was the manager there, and he suggested that I would have my own program. I could do sports. And I said, no, I know antiques very, very well. I'll be the first broadcaster in the country on collectibles and antiques. And Jack Bailey said, I think you would be the first, but let me do a little research, because he had been in radio mostly all of his life.
Sure.
And I came in the next week, and he said, yes, you're the very first broadcaster on collectibles and antiques.
So you turned down the sports segment and did the collectibles
Well,
antiques?
you got to remember that every station had sports.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're
And
saying,
I wanted
yeah.
to do something different,
Unique,
because
yeah, sure.
I've been in antiques and collectibles all of my life. And matter of fact, it worked out beautifully. I was in it for 8 years, and I traveled from coast to coast. I did,
that's cool. Oh, that's okay,
San
good.
Sinim and Hearst Castle. I was there for 3 days. I was in San Francisco for a week. I did a radio show in Alcatraz.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's cool.
Al Capone's cell. And the Mardi Gras down in New Orleans. I saw the first invitation in New Orleans.
Wait, back it up.
Yeah.
Al Capone's cell?
Yes.
Alcatraz.
Yes.
All right. So now, tell me a little bit about what year was that, and then what did you do? What was?
Well,
tell me a little bit about.
Well, I just wanted to do that because in American collectible history, prison collectibles is quite valuable.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Oh yes.
Really?
Oh yeah. Every
the bars of soap don't come cheap.
Yeah, I know, right.
Every penitentiary in the country has a collectible tied to it. And I wanted to go to the very first one in Alcatraz, and that was very fun. They took me. I sat up there at the highest level of Alcatraz, in the yard.
Okay.
And that's at the highest point, and that's only for the long longevity of the prisoners. You have to be something like 15 years in before you could get to the top tier.
All right. And you were in the Capone cell.
Yes.
So what kind of recording equipment did you have with you? Were you broadcasting, or were you just recording?
No. What I would do is I'd have a little tape recorder about that big with a little case on my side.
Right.
And I would
little
go
Walkman size.
Yes. And I would go and do the show with the guard from the tourist man from Alcatraz. Also, I was in Birdman's cell.
Oh, yeah. The Bird Mountain of Alcatraz.
Yeah, did a show there. Then I was invited down to San Simeon, Hearst Castle. Have you ever been there?
No, that's one of my.
No,
I'd love to see that. Man.
I was there for 3 days.
Really?
Wow.
Really something. It's just a career that I really enjoyed.
I spent a lot of time writing about Hearst in the second book because the influence of his newspapers.
Sure.
Because Hearst is the owner of the Detroit Times, which is my favorite newspaper of all time. The Detroit Times is my favorite.
When I was a boy, I'm giving my age away, I used to deliver the Times.
Did you really?
All three papers.
What was the slogan? What was the slogan? It was like all the news and none of the something like this.
Something like that.
It was
all the news and none of the facts.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was something like it was something like that, like all the news and
Randolph Hearst. Well, I'll tell you a cute story. The guy told me that he wrote a story, and he sent it to Chicago, and there was a tremendous murder or something, and he gave an address where this event happened.
Yeah.
And the writer of the Chicago Tribune or whatever his paper was of the Hearst publication in Chicago, he went out to investigate where this took place. It was a vacant lot.
Oh, jeez.
But Hearst always said that you can't sell a paper if you're saying nice things.
Yeah.
But if you make it glory and bad, the paper will go off the rack.
Well, to build on that, my favorite newspaper editor, which I don't know if anybody out there has hey, that's my second favorite newspaper editor of all time. But my favorite, I don't really have a number two actually, the number one is Arthur Brisbane, who was Hearst's editor, the editor of all. He had an empire of newspapers.
Right.
And Arthur Brisbane, if anybody's listening and wants to, take a look at Arthur Brisbane's career, it's amazing. And he's just an absolute legend. But I actually have his quote, like one of his main quotes, taped to my desk, which it says, if you don't capture the reader's attention in the very first sentence, there's no need to write anymore.
Oh, wow.
And I've got that right on my desk.
Yeah.
So, like, everything I do is the same thing. It's like I try to. Like, if that very first sentence, books or paragraphs or whatever, like, that's how I always try to do it, is like, hit you with that, like, bam, that's Arthur Brisbane.
Well, I'll give you a little Detroit history.
Yeah.
Detroit has the salt mine under
Yes.
Detroit.
Yes.
Okay. I did a radio show in the salt mine in Detroit.
All right.
In Detroit.
Jeez.
Okay. It's off of Jefferson Avenue. And
Yeah.
the grain of salt, when you go down in the earth, it goes and it runs. And I noticed that they had traffic signs down there and trucks and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And it said, do not do any mining here. And I couldn't figure that out. And the reason was it was under the city of Dearborn, the salt.
Okay.
And they didn't want to pay Henry Ford because he had the mineral rights.
Ah.
Now, a grain of salt takes 1,000,000 years to make.
Yeah.
And the salt mine, I asked the lady, I said, how far does this salt mine run? She said, if you continued on, if we kept drilling and taking it out, you'd be under Niagara Falls.
Oh, wow.
Jeez. I didn't know it was that
Yeah.
big.
Yeah,
That was one of
I
my-
got to tour them. I toured them before they closed them down.
Yep.
Yeah, that was fun. That was interesting.
Yep.
So, so you did get back to sports. Collectibles were your passion on the radio, but you did do some sports, and you got really connected with some pretty amazing stuff. And there was something that you were pretty proud of. You got invited to the Golden Huddle, and we've been talking about that event.
Well, how that all happened, I think, was the previous show, is that at this little sports show, I saw in the paper that they were celebrating the 1935 anniversary of the City of Champions.
Right.
And we had the event at Westland Mall, and Abe Kushner came in, and he was the only one from 35 that came in, and he invited me to come to the Golden Huddle.
And Abe Kushner was the trainer for the Lions
in 1935.
And I've met his son too. I met his son, Abe, and he actually gave us and his son gave me some great stuff for the book. Stephen Kushner, he said. If Steven's listening right now, because he's a friend of his on like Facebook, and but he was a great guy. He really hooked me up with some really interesting stuff.
Well, we stayed pretty close. He died. I met him in '85. He passed in '87, but we had pretty good conversations.
Oh, did you? Good.
And
Even after the event.
Yeah. I called him, and consequently, he also was the trainer of Dutch Clark.
Oh, all right.
And he told me a lot of stories about Clark.
Yeah. Well, one of the things he was telling you about Dutch, just to pick your brain a little bit, to tap that needle, is the idea that it was that Clark had a photogenic memory. He had like is that what it's called? Is it photogenic?
Photographic?
Photographic. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie.
Mine's pornographic.
Oh man, you're not supposed to say that on the air, Jamie. Now you're gonna get.
It's not a swear. It's a little off color, but
it is. You're right. It's fine. You can say whatever you want.
Well, the players confirmed that he did have that
photographic memory.
Yeah, he would watch.
What am I thinking? Yeah,
he would watch the plays and
very handsome memory.
He would watch the plays and look for players with weakness. And he was. Abe told me that he would always dress last. He would go out and watch. It was only 25 roster in 35, and he would go out and street.
Yeah, but what they would do is they would let Presnell start, and then they would, and then Dutch and Potsy would read the defense, read what they're going to do,
right,
and then Dutch would go out there with this Napoleonic stratagem to take pick apart that other team.
Yes, and like the players said, always at halftime, Dutch Clark would come up with some kind of a different play.
Yeah.
He was that great.
Yeah, like in the 35 championship, they came out and just passed all over to start the game was in the dead of winter, and that's what I guess it's like a spoiler alert because we haven't got to the 35 championship yet. But the cool thing was that they came out, just to back up your point though, is that one of the things we will talk about is how in the 35 championship game, they came out in like a blizzard and were throwing the ball in the first half and killing the Giants with it. Yep. And then in the second half, they came out and started running all over the place. It was the run. That's all they did was run. And so it's basically the same concept. Is at halftime they made these adjustments and just romped people with it.
I found it very ironic that the Lions' very first game they played in 1934 was against the New York Giants, And then in 35, they win the championship. From
That is a great point.
That is a nice bookend.
Yeah,
that's a
total bookend.
But what's the chances of that? If your very first game you ever played as a Lion,
right.
The next year you're in the championship game against the same team.
Against that team. Did they win that first game?
Yeah. They won their first 10. And then they shut out the first
7 shutouts. I got every one of them.
Yeah.
All right. So, but Tom, you got involved, and then you got invited to this Golden Huddle, and being the radio professional that you were, you took your tape recorder.
Oh, yes.
And you were able to capture some wonderful interviews with, you said that there were only 17 men alive at the time, and 10 of them actually made it to that event. And you actually got to sit down and talk to a couple of them. And then you took all that information, and you were really proud of this, as we were talking before. And you were telling me about how this came together, because you're a Dearborn citizen. You're a Dearborn guy. I went to U of M in Dearborn.
Oh yes.
So I'm a implanted Dearborn guy.
Yep.
All my fraternity brothers are all Divine Child kids, and
Divine Child. Yep.
Yeah. But you connected with the historical museum there, because you wanted to preserve these tapes and these interviews. And so what did you do because leading up to this, and then what did you end up producing along with the Dearborn Historical Museum?
Well, I did in '85, I did it by cassette tape.
Yeah.
And I did the interview, and I had a presentation in 1985 of the 50th anniversary, and I put the cassette tape away.
Mm-hmm. So you just played the cuts on the air.
Yeah, that was it. And I put it, and I said, for years went by, and I said, I wonder if there's something I could do to take those players and save it and make some kind of a movie out of it or a DVD.
Mm-hmm.
So I pondered on that, and I contacted some different companies, and it was a lot of money to do that.
Yeah.
And it was out of my ballpark.
Right.
So then I got thinking, one of my earliest radio shows, I did some work at the Dearborn Historical Museum, and I went to them, and Mary McDonald was the creator there at that time.
Right.
And I said, Mary, I got something here that we could put together of the 1935 Lions, and I'll put some pictures together. We'll put the words together. She said, well, geez, Tom, that's Detroit. We're Dearborn, but let me work on it.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later, she said, yes, you pay taxes in the city of Dearborn. You've been here a long time. We'll do it. And we'll give you a program. It's called Through the Arsenal Gates. You'll have a half an hour, and we'll photograph it in our studio. Mm-hmm. So I had to take that tape, which on one part of it's Charlie Gehringer, and the other part of it is what the 35 Lions.
You interviewed Charlie Gehringer, too. That's one of the things we're going to get to in a future episode is the Gehringer thing.
And the combined audio tape was a total of the two series was 49 minutes.
Okay.
And they only gave me 15 minutes for the show.
Right.
And I was really lucky to squeeze this in.
Yeah.
So I had to go down to the Detroit Public Library and put the earphones on and listen to my tape and go to and try to find the pictures with the Times News and the Free Press to match it up for the best.
Okay.
And I got that done, and then also I did the Gehringer at the same time. It took me approximately 2 years to put that together.
Oh my goodness! So this was like 2 years in the making, and you grabbed these. I extracted the parts out of the DVD. Of the full Through the Arsenal Gates, where you're talking with the curator, and you talk about your history, and you talk about, and I've heard enough about your history, Tom. We're not gonna listen to all that crap again.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit. It wears my voice out.
I'm loving you, man. I'm just playing. But so I pulled out just the tracks. So we have three of the lines, and we're going to focus on that first, and we're going to see where it goes from there. But we got Jim Red Stacy. You talk about Jim Red. Well, we hear from Jim Red Stacy.
Yes.
We hear from Frank Christensen, and then we hear from Ernie Cadell.
Ernie Cadell is something.
That's Tom's favorite player.
That's my favorite player.
So we'll save Ernie.
Mine's Presnell's mine.
We'll save Ernie for last. So we got Jim Red Stacy, and we have Frank Christensen. So do you remember? And here's a picture of Tom on set there.
There he is.
That's a clip from the piece.
By the way, you see, Russ says I'm a commissioner. That was my loophole to get in. I was not a commissioner.
Okay, they just put that up there to get you on. Okay, great.
Yeah. Boy, I look young in that.
So Red Stacy was just a little background between the two players. You got Red Stacy, Was an offensive lineman.
Tell us a little bit about
Red
Red
Stacey. Was
Stacey.
an offensive lineman. And who was the second guy that we said?
And then Frank Christensen.
Frank Christensen, they called him Little Chris to distinguish him from George Christensen, who was we talked about briefly, his nickname was Tarzan because of his size. And so he was Big Chris, of course. So Frank Christensen was called Little Chris, but he was by no means little. He was he was a blocking back for the Lions, Frank Christensen was, and he was also the team's best punter. He was in a game back in the 30s. The game was about a lot of it was field position, and Frank Christensen was a defensive back / blocking back / team best punter. So those are the two guys that we're about to meet. And Ernie Cadell, if we get to that point, Ernie Cadell was the wing back.
Red Stacey only played for 1 year.
Yeah, he was very short. Yeah, very short time with the Lions.
So
35.
all right, so Jim Red Stacey, but the thing is that what struck me when you were telling me the story beforehand and just now is that you spent 2 years like gathering, as we watch this, the B-roll, the images that people are gonna if they join us on Facebook or if they watch this on YouTube later, if you're listening to the audio podcast, this one would be worth a trip over to YouTube to find this episode 19 to see these little clips that you spent all this time putting together.
Or they can go out and get the books, buy the books, and they have tons of pictures in there too if you want to see what the players look like.
Put the two together, you got to.
But I was impressed with what you threw together here. So this mutes us when I play it. These aren't that long.
And our next Lion player was Jim Red Stacey.
Thank you. This is Jim Red Stacey from the University of Oklahoma. I was very fortunate to have played on the 1935 World Championship team. I played 2 years after that, and then I had to call it quits. After all, this football is a... to celebrate the 25th anniversary. I thought that was great. It was great 25 years ago. I just put the 25-year anniversary in the shade.
That was Jim Red Stacey.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was people would hear that better than we did.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we're just hearing the headphones. We got quiet there for a second. I was hoping
no. That was people heard that better than we did. They might have been. I don't know if it might have been too loud.
Pretty good. You could hear
brings
his voice
back memories. I haven't viewed this in a long time.
What's his voice of the past, man? The voice of the past is just a cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a cool thing.
So, was there anything that struck you about Jim when you were talking about him with him?
Well, it was 2:00 in the morning or 2:30 when I interviewed them, and they were all.
Is that the end of the party?
Were they drinking or anything? Were they all having like a
guitar?
Were they good?
Yeah, they
good.
were.
I'm glad they're having fun.
They were having some fun. I'm going to tell you a cute story.
Yeah.
Joe Schmidt, who was the Lions in '53 champion.
He was a linebacker for them, wasn't he?
Yes, one of the greats.
One of the greats.
He was voted the top 100.
Okay, good.
But I thought this was real cute. So Joe Schmidt was at the reunion, and Bob James was the alumni director. And about 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, Joe Schmidt walks out. He's going home, and Bob James and I had the players in the center of the corridor outside the ballroom. And James says, "Hey, Joe Schmidt, what do you think of the 1935 world champion Lions?" Joe Schmidt said, "The 53 world champion Lions versus the 35 Lions." And believe it or not, these men all at one voice said, "Joe Schmidt, you bring the ball and don't you be late."
Damn,
those are the Iron Men.
That's an Iron Man. Yeah, they're not screwing around out there. They're not going to take
these
that
guys
from
were
Schmidt.
at that time were 80 years old. So was Schmidt was, and they were kids at heart. They wanted to go. And they meant it. They wanted to go.
Something I'll never forget. To the parking lot, boys. Let's sort this out right now.
Bring the ball.
But don't you be late.
Yeah.
We're ready to go.
I bet, man. Those guys are Iron Men. You're going to mess with the Iron Man? No, not me. No.
So what else do we know about Frank Christensen?
This is very interesting on Frank.
Yeah, well, like you say, Frank Christensen. This is a guy this is an original like Iron Man. I mean, this is a guy that, he stretches back with the organization all the way back to Portsmouth. Red Stacey was a new guy, but he was with the Lions, but Frank Christensen was a legacy player. He was with them in Portsmouth.
Listen very carefully what Frank says. This is fantastic.
All right, here we go.
Was Frank Christensen. He was the rookie on the team, And this is quite interesting what Mr. Christensen says. So let's listen to Frank.
In the days we played, money was not a very important thing. We played because we wanted to play. We played for the fun of the game. It was important to get a paycheck, but by no means in the magnitude that they are today. I well remember Jack Johnson, a teammate from Utah, with me. We had negotiated our original contract, and I don't know for what reason I was a back, and I had $135 a game, and Jack had $125. We went in to renegotiate our next year's contract with owner G.A. Richards. We sat down at his desk in his left office in the Fisher Building, and he said, "Christensen, do you think you're worth more to this team than Jack Johnson?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "By God, neither do I. Jack gets a $10 raise and you stay the same." But I think our teams at that time were so molded together because we were less. We didn't have 50 players, you know. We were, I don't know, 22 or 23 is all. And we were very close together. I think this bunch here at this meeting realizes so well the relationship that existed 50 years ago. I thank everybody for everything that's gone on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey.
That's cool. Yeah, that's funny, man. I was cracking up. I don't think they could hear us cracking up.
No.
World champion, 1936. He gets a $10 raise. What did Mahomes
He goes, by
get?
God, you think you're worth more than Jack Johnson says? He goes, no, sir. He goes, no, by God, neither do I.
And by golly, Mahomes in Kansas City, what did he just sign? $480 million.
It's a whole nother world. These guys have never even imagined that.
He's a world champion.
Yeah.
Mahomes is a world champion. $480 million, and this kid gets a $10 raise.
Yeah.
You can't park your car downtown for $10.
Yeah, it's $10. And he goes, the great thing is always he goes, at least he was honest. He goes, you think you're worth more? Because Jack Johnson, and he was not wrong either. Jack Johnson was an awesome offensive lineman. Jack Johnson was awesome.
Never go in
He
together.
was a great offensive lineman. And so he's like, do you think you're worth more than Jack Johnson? He's like, no, sir. He goes, well, by God, neither do I.
Jack Johnson married Ernie Cadell's sister.
Oh, yeah. I know there was a lot of.
That was his brother-in-law.
There was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot of connections between these guys, man.
Can I make a punt? When Doug Knott was at the...
Oh, now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about him for a long time.
Okay,
yeah.
he was standing behind me, and he didn't want to be interviewed at the lobby.
Because he wasn't there. He wasn't there for the 35 championship.
Well, he was he was on the team, though. He was
in the year, but not the championship.
Okay. So he's behind me, and he comes up after the interview, and he said, I heard Christensen talk about that $10 that Jack Johnson got. He said, you know what? He said, I asked Richards for $2. $2. He said, I've made $128 a game. And he said, I thought I would like to get $2 more for $130. And I approached Richards, and Richards said, he said, if you keep that up, he said, I'm taking that $2 away, and you're going to go to $114.
Jeez.
And Doug said, boy, did I get away? He said, that $2 was a lot of money in 1935.
Yeah,
the reason I was kind of excited, Tom broached the subject on Doug Knott, and it was actually kind of sad, really, is because Doug Knott, in 1934, Doug Knott was with the University of Detroit. And Doug, he put up all kinds of crazy yards passing. He was like one of the there's a couple of great passers in college that year. One of them was Dixie Howell, who ended up signing with the Detroit Tigers as a hitter, as an outfielder, for the 1935 season. And then you had Pug Vaughn, which actually signed with the Lions. He was from the University of Tennessee. He was a crazy, awesome passer. And like I said, the size of the ball had changed in 1934. Oh. So now so passing was really becoming a thing. And so that's why all these elite college passers are just coveted by these different teams. And so Doug Knott, coming from the University of Detroit from 1934, I forgot how many yards he put up, but it was a crazy ton of yards. I think it was like 2,000 yards or something like 1,000, maybe it was 1,000 yards in 1934. Doug Knott comes into the Lions signed Doug Knott for 1935. He's one of me and Jamie talked about this. They had the varsity versus freshman game in which the Potsy had like a tryout for new players, and Doug Knott was one of the guys that made the team. Ah, right. And so he was with the Lions for the first basically half of the season, and then Doug Knott got traded for Bill Shepard to the Washington, or to the Boston Redskins.
Right.
To the Boston Redskins. And that's where Bill Shepard came from, was from the Boston Redskins. And Bill Shepard was an absolute monster in the 1935 for the rest of the season, because Bill Shepard was basically a halfback,
right?
And he was he was a rookie as well. And he's one of these guys in college that was like just racking up touchdowns. Like it was like, I don't know what his nickname was. It was something like touchdown a second Shepard or something like that. Yeah. He was just a mauler as a halfback. And so and at one point, and I actually wrote a whole scene in the screenplay about this moment, because there was they actually, the two teams had played each other. The Lions and Redskins played each other, and it was right after that game that Doug Knott went to the Boston Redskins and Shepard came to the Lions, and Shepard ended up becoming a mauler, an absolute mauling back for the Lions. And so that may have been why, when you're saying Doug Knott was kind of like off to the background, he was on the 35 team, but he just wasn't there for the championship. And and he was a Detroiter, so he would absolutely be part of this. They were probably friends with him. And so he probably didn't want a bunch of limelight, like, oh, there's Doug Knott, the world champion Detroit Lion, when technically that wasn't, he didn't want to, say, oh, no, I wasn't a champion. You know what I mean? Like, you can imagine how that'd be kind of awkward for somebody in that spot.
Well, when I interviewed these players, I literally didn't have a choice, because Bob James was the alumni director.
Yeah.
And he went to all of them and asked them if they wanted to participate in this interview after the reunion. And
but you can imagine a little bit for Doug, from his perspective, like how it would be like a little bit uncomfortable, because he was a 35 Lion, and this is an event for 35, for the 35 team, and he helped them get there.
Right.
He just wasn't on the team for the championship game itself. I mean, sure, he would have loved to be, my God, but so I mean, like going, here's Doug Knott, a 35 champion Lion. Like, maybe, who knows? Maybe he got a ring for playing a certain amount of games with them or something. I don't know, but
he got invited to the reunion.
That's what I'm saying. So they must have thought enough of him. That's interesting. I'm glad that he. And just a little side note, I actually met, I think it was either Doug Knott's daughter or somebody like related to him. And she had she brought in his scrapbook, and I have a ton of. It was after I put out the books, but. I've got just an absolute like one of the greatest Doug Knott collections, like from the University of Detroit, from the Detroit Lions. Like this show, I'm going to create the uncomfortable radio host for a second. This is the only place ever this is like the Detroit, history junkie show.
Oh yeah.
This is the only place in the world where we're going, Doug Knott. We're like analyzing players that people may have never heard of.
I love it.
That have never heard. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is the place.
Those are names that shouldn't be faded into history. They should come up.
Exactly what I'm trying to say. Like, we're having this show. It's almost like you have people like on ESPN, and they're like analyzing and micro-analyzing different like moments from a game that happened this Sunday or whatever. We're talking about stuff that happened in 35, that happened in the history. And anybody that's listening to this show, whether it's at this exact moment, maybe you're listening to an archived episode, you're listening to something that maybe this is a year from now, and you're listening to this show, and it's October 29th, 2020.
Yes.
If you got something to contribute to this story, to the 1934-35 season, maybe it's the Portsmouth Spartans, whatever it is. If you got something to contribute to the story, this is the place that we're archiving this. We're bringing the story back. You want to talk about this. If you got something to say about this subject, which is, it's something that happened 80. Did we work out the math? 85 years ago. 85. Tom's got it. 85 years ago.
35, 85.
Yeah. So you got it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, but this is the place for that, man.
Yeah.
Like, this is the place. This is a major. This is a story. This is 1 year in Detroit history, Detroit sports history, that is so big that we have an entire show built around it, and we have basically endless content.
Oh,
right, endless. We haven't even touched it. We haven't even.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting started.
Just getting started.
And we got guests. We got special guests. Like, this is like, if you got something to bring in about the 35 season, if you got something to talk about, like with this whole thing. Especially something maybe nobody ever heard of, man, give us a call, write us in, comment, do something, get on the show. We're trying to, like I say, this is something more than just like it's not just some kind of random talk show. We're trying to bring back a story that has been basically forgotten, man, and that it's it's a handful of junkies like me and Tom, and now Jamie, of course.
Yeah.
Jamie started a show on the subject. There's a couple other junkies out there on this 35 story.
We appreciate people listening and we're following along on this journey.
And we're trying to find the other junkies that are out there, and we're trying to create new junkies. We're trying to create new junkies. Did I say that somewhat right?
That's it.
Yeah, okay, good.
And it actually happened. There was a year of 35, and Detroit was the Gosh, if
City of Champions.
Well,
Tom.
if there was
a
Television Today Sports Center, it'd probably been all Detroit. Gehringer,
Constant.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to Charlie Gehringer, he said that he had a friend at the Detroit Times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And they would call him up, and he would talk to Charlie and said, "Geez, Boston's calling to see what Detroit just did."
yeah.
And Charlie Gehringer told me that the Chicago Tribune, one of the sports directors, wanted him to write up, "What hasn't Detroit won?"
Yeah. Well, but what's
Yeah.
interesting too is
Two stories.
is that you have the in order for the Tigers to win the World Series, they had to beat the Chicago Cubs. For the Lions to get to the NFL championship, they had to go through the Chicago Bears, who they had not beat since 1931.
Right.
They had to beat the Bears on Thanksgiving. The Bears' victory on Thanksgiving is what gave the Lions the chance to get to the NFL championship. And then the Red Wings fought one of the greatest rivalry dogfights in NHL history during the 1935-36 season against the Blackhawks. So that's what I'm saying. Like, the road to all three championships went through Chicago, and when we get to the Red Wings, wait till we talk. Like, we're going to break down the Red Wings in so many so many components, because that the dogfight against the Blackhawks knew. They're like, they wanted. Can you imagine? Detroit's been winning everything all year. Joe Louis has done his thing. We haven't even started Joe Louis yet. And along the entire season, Detroit is basically one championship away from a clean sweep. And they're already talking about City of Champions this, City of Champions that. And the Blackhawks have a chance to knock the Red Wings off their pedestal. That season came down to the last game of the regular season against the Blackhawks. Literally the last game of the season. And the Blackhawks, can you imagine, like, what they would have done to try to stop, to play spoiler, to crap all over that parade? They would have done so immediately. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you talk about rivalry growth between two cities. This is it. This is it.
When you get to the hockey segment, what you've got to remember is Detroit had two hockey teams, the Olympics.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth, Tom. You're taking the words out of my mouth. Go ahead, though.
And Gehringer told me that the two teams played at Olympia.
Absolutely. The Olympics and the Red Wings, yeah.
When they won, they were in the Toronto, or the
Are you talking about a league?
The Olympics they were affiliated with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Not at all. They were the Red Wings affiliates.
Oh, they were?
They were the Red Wings affiliates. That's where the majority of their played. All these, that's what was so special about the Red Wings, is that half of them played. Here's a little quick story. I know we're not on the Red Wings, but this is, man, we go where we go.
No,
right? We go where this story takes us.
Come on.
And here's the thing, before the at the end of the 34-35 season, okay? Basically, like, the Red Wings had a horrible year. Year. But the Olympics won the IHL championship.
Oh, that's right.
And so here's the thing. So the Olympics, they were basically viewed as better than the Red Wings. And so they played a preseason inter-city championship between the Olympics and the Detroit Red Wings, and the Olympics won. The Olympics beat them. Okay,
I did.
That's what I'm saying. Now we're starting to go off the topic towards a future story.
I thought the Olympics were affiliated with
the Buffalo team was the Toronto at that time. Yeah, Buffalo. Yeah. So, anyways, anyways, and in fact, the Buffalo team with Conn Smythe. Conn Smythe was the Toronto owner, GM, whatever. And then Buffalo was their IHL team. And one of my favorite player from the Red Wings. I mean, my favorite player is Ebby Goodfellow. That's my favorite player. But my real favorite that nobody we're talking about. Everybody likes Ebby Goodfellow. Like, that's the guy, right?
Abby Goodfellow. Who doesn't?
Ebby, right? That's like in Dutch Clark. Everybody likes Dutch Clark from the Lions. But who's your next favorite guy that's not the main guy, right? What was I going to say? So Bucko McDonald was my guy. McDonald was my guy from the Red Wings. And so Bucko,
love these names, man.
Bucko. Like I say, Bucko is one of my main characters in the entire screenplay. And the reason I mentioned him was because Bucko, he was before he came to the Red Wings, he was one of the greatest lacrosse players in all of Canada. Okay, and he was so great that he wanted to try a different sport. So he joined up with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he went to Buffalo, and he could barely even skate. And so the Buffalo basically traded him or cut him or gave him away. There's not a precise story of how he came to the Olympics, but as soon as he came to the Olympics, somehow he learned how to skate or something. And within 1 year of being on the Olympics, he was like one of the greatest players in the minor leagues. And they brought him to the Detroit Red Wings, and he was just amazing for them in their very first year. So that's what I'm saying. Like that's what I'm trying to say is like and Conn Smythe was even saying like one of the biggest regrets he ever had was letting go of Bucko from there to let him go to the Olympics and eventually
don't let go of Bucko.
Yeah, but the Olympics are a core component, and the Olympics ended up going off to Pittsburgh. And they became the foundation of what ended up becoming the Pittsburgh Penguins, for God's sake.
I want a Bucko jersey.
That's the winning tradition they brought there was to become the Pittsburgh Penguins, yes.
Let's listen to Ernie Cadell.
I was going to say, because Frank, we heard from Frank Christensen, and then you said Frank married Ernie's sister?
Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson married
That was
Ernie's
Christensen
sister.
talking about Jack Johnson.
Oh, fair play.
Yes.
Jack ended up marrying Ernie's sister?
Yes.
Because they
That's
both went to
great.
the University of Utah, didn't they?
I believe they did.
I think so,
All
yeah.
right.
But Ernie Cadell, interesting, he married the mayor's daughter of Portsmouth.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And that's why when they were playing the 35 championship game that Clark and Cadell they were hoping that the broadcast from the Titan Stadium across the country would get into Portsmouth. And Portsmouth only had one radio station. That was WPAY. And we don't know for sure. Nobody knows if that broadcast ever got
Oh,
there.
man. I would love to, if anybody's listening, once again, if you know of any information of whether it actually reached Portsmouth, because it was a coast-to-coast broadcast. That was what was so special about that Thanksgiving game was George Richards setting up that coast-to-coast broadcasting network.
That was the first
coast-to-coast game.
And that was very interesting because, in the old days, you'd have to clear, WXYZ or whatever calling to clear this station all the way down.
And that's not an insignificant,
WJR.
and it's not an insignificant, thing to understand because today, every single year, like for Thanksgiving Day, games on Thanksgiving for NFL, there's always there's a couple regulars, the Cowboys, the Packers, in the Bears or in the whatever, but it's the Lions guaranteed every single year, and why? And that's a question that a lot of times you don't ask a question like why that is, whatever like this.
Yeah.
It's because that's where it all started.
Yep.
It all started with this coast to coast broadcasting network in Detroit.
Well, you go to Canton, Ohio, and one of the very first things you see when you go in is the first broadcast from the Thanksgiving Day game, 1934.
And the announcers for that too. I forget the names off the top of my head. One of them was Graham McNamee, and the other guy, I forgot the other one. But they were like the broadcasters in the country. They were like number one broadcasters in the country, and they were broadcasting that Thanksgiving game. Like this wasn't just something like, they set up this cool little network. This was a major programming thing, and that's what I'm saying. Like that's why, even though the Lions lost the first Thanksgiving game, and they won the second one for the 35 season. But that's why there's such an institution to this day is that coast to coast broadcasting network ran through Detroit, and it started in Detroit with the 34-35 Lions.
Well, to clear all the networks, can you imagine? I mean, every St. Louis and all the way down the line in the old days of radio to clear the network.
But I'm saying like it was a big deal then. It's a big deal now, and a lot of times people are going, I wonder, It's it's just a tradition. I mean, the Lions aren't they don't get the Thanksgiving game because they're any they're better than every other team on Thanksgiving. It's just a thing. Like there's a reason why for everything, and the reason why it comes once again. This is just another component of why this story is important.
All right, so Ernie was at that Golden Huddle, and you were able to talk to Ernie Cadell. Here it is.
Let's listen to Ernie Cadell, who was very proud of those records that were set in 1935.
I want to say that 2,885 yards in 12 games doesn't sound like an awful lot, but it's still the world's record and still standing. And they called me from Miami, if you please, 5 years ago, was the day that they thought that they broke the record. And my wife answering the phone and all that, and I had informed the guy that was calling and said, do you realize that they set that record with 12 games? He said, oh my God, I'm lost on this. He said, I can't go in any deals at all on this because we're on 16. Remember? Well, that's good enough for me. And when I had Dutch Clark and Ace Gutowski, Father Lumpkin, and I was in there, and I loved it. They made us mad to begin with because we had a bunch of zeros on the first 7 games. So then when we started in on this game, Philadelphia, we ran in that particular game 847 yards. Made us mad a little bit, you know. The guy named the Detroit Lions, and they scored on us. They scored on us the first time they had the ball. So thank you very much for all the hospitality that you people have shown here in this area. And over the years, I enjoyed every minute of playing football in Detroit.
There you go.
Okay, so there's actually a couple things to dissect from that. There
Yeah.
really
Well,
is.
first of all, he said Philadelphia was actually the Pittsburgh
It was
Pirates.
Pittsburgh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And what he's referring to, let me hit it real quick. So what he's talking about is that when he said it made us mad a little bit, what he's talking about is the Lions. We've already talked about this.
Yeah.
They won their first 10 games, but they were unscored upon for their first 7. Well, game number 8 is the Pittsburgh Pirates scored on them with a 40-plus yard touchdown pass by the Pittsburgh Pirates. And that's what he's talking about when it made us mad. And so what he's alluding to is the fact that the Lions ended up winning that game. I was looking for the exact score here, but it was like 40-7.
Oh, okay.
So after he said in the initial drive of the game, they threw this like lucky 40-yard touchdown bomb and scored a touchdown on the Lions. He's like, well, it made us mad a little bit, so they ended up romping them 40-7.
Yeah.
You know?
You just messed up our record.
Yeah, exactly. They were mad, so they rammed it down their throat. The rest of the game. So that's one of the things I wanted to unpack, yeah.
Yeah, they played that game on November the 14th, 1934. The score was 40 for Detroit and 7 for
40-7.
40-7.
Exactly. I didn't have to retract anything. That's good.
Yeah.
40-7. I nailed it.
I have their record right here. They played 13 games. They allowed 53 points.
That's insane.
So if you take that 13, multiply it by 4, that's 52 quarters of playing football. They let in 1 point a quarter.
That's insane. Yeah.
And they allowed and they scored 240 points.
Yeah, and so
for the year.
And that's why. And by the
Nice.
way, if you go look up defensive records, if you look up NFL records, and then you type in a defense, Wikipedia has a pretty good list. Just a basic Wikipedia search,
Yeah.
and there is an absolute list. There's 1934 Lions that are peppered all the way through the list.
Yeah.
Still to this day. And go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
I was going to say, can you imagine those players with 7 games, shutouts? They played 7 hours of professional football against their own peers, and not one score.
Not a score.
Not one score came in.
And that's one of
brilliant.
the things that we're going to be talking about. We'll probably bring this up in the next show. Is the idea that is the Iron Man thing because actually we got some voices, some of these interviews where they're talking about the idea that they went both ways.
Right.
So that's going to be we're going to hear on probably the next episode. when
So
we talk
those
to
were
Tom.
in that TV show because we're going to have to hit the pause button here
Yeah.
and pick it up again.
Tom's coming back next week, right?
So
Good,
those
Tom.
were the 3 that made it to the cut of Through the Arsenal Gates, the DVD that you shared with me.
Yeah.
You also played from the Tigers, Charlie Gehringer, that an 8-minute clip with him as well. So we'll get to that. But we have more that didn't make that cut. And so we're going to dive a little deeper
We've got the full recording here. We're going to put it on the thing.
into those. So we're going to extract a few more of those. And this is good. This is good point to pause and
what I'd love
grab
to do,
it again
Jamie,
next time.
What I'd love to do is for the next time we're going to be bringing some of these episodes out. Maybe what we can do is because it's like 27 minutes long. We don't want to do the whole show with the recording.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick out a few of our favorites. But maybe we can just put up like an audio of like the entire 30 minutes thing for the listener.
That'll be for all our Patreon fans.
Yeah, for something like that. Yeah. So we're gonna sell Tom's stuff because that's what Patreon.
Tom,
don't know what Patreon
we're selling
is.
your crap, Tom.
Yeah. But I'm saying like just for posterity's sake,
that
we can put
cocaine
the full
free there,
recording.
buddy.
Tom's got a can of coke. He didn't know it was going to cost him the rights to his cassette tape.
Well, the cassette tape's got some interesting things in it.
Yeah.
You'll hear Abe Kushner's voice. He'll talk.
I can't wait. That's going to be a whole show by itself. The stuff that Abe Kushner talks about is a whole show by itself.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about one last really quick thing that Ernie Cordell said on the tape. He
quick.
was talking about the record that they set with the rushing yards in only 12 games. And I'm sitting here looking at my notes. I've got it written down here somewhere, but what it was the Lions in 1936, which is the year after this NFL championship game. They set the all-time rushing record that was never broken in a 12-game season.
Yeah.
It took the addition of extra games in the 19. I think it was a 74 Dolphins. That's what I was looking for. 72 or 74 Dolphins, with the addition of a couple extra games that finally broke the record. But in a 12-game season, it was never broken. That's what he was talking about.
That's what Ernie Cadell was related
that's
to.
What, that's
when
what
they said they caught him from Miami.
Exactly.
They get a hold of him.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to.
They're
I
like,
wanted to frame what he was saying.
No, you guys didn't quite do it. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So it was never. That's what Ernie Cadell was saying, was that no other team in that 12-game season era ever broke what the 1936 Lions did, and that's what that's the kind of team they were. Was like 34, unbeaten streak for 7 games, 35 championship, 36 all-time NFL rushing record. I mean, that's the kind of team they were, man.
So we're going to hear from more of the Iron Men next time. We just want to thank everybody. It's, of course, Tom, for making your way in here. We really
love
appreciate
having you on, Tom. Dude, Tom will be on next week, maybe the week after, but we're going to have
sharing these stories.
Yeah,
love
exactly.
it. And we appreciate everybody who's been tuning in and following along as we've been doing this. If you haven't already, subscribe wherever you're picking up the podcast or the video on the YouTube. And if you're just watching on Facebook, then head over to YouTube or it's an audio podcast as well. So wherever finer podcasts are sold, just go grab it.
If this is your first episode, we archive them all on like Jamie's saying on YouTube and iTunes and all this. So if it's your first episode you're listening to, and
thanks for hanging out.
Jump back to check it out.
The podcast is Detroit City of Champions, and we'll see you next time.